Spoilers for the 5.1 Archon quest. Hi guys, it's me, Roosevelt. Oh boy, did we get some giant reveals in the new Archon quest that I desperately need to hyperfixate on. This is your last chance to avoid major spoilers. 3, 2, 1, okay. Welcome to the Hotties Club, handsome. Capitano is from Khaenri'ah. So I basically want to scream about that for 10 minutes or so. Specifically about his identity and if we've heard of him elsewhere. But I also want to discuss that very last scene with the Lord of the Night, because Capitano is plotting something with Ronova and her rules about death. And just as a vague preview for an unhinged theory, I think we're getting a new pyro Archon. But before I start explaining myself, I wanted to quickly say, if you enjoy my content, please like, comment, and subscribe, maybe share with your friends. I'm kind of close to a pretty round number right now, and I think that'd be super cool. And more internet dopamine for me means more Genshin crack theory videos. Anyway, this is going to be shorter than my usual videos, but I just wanted to get this out of my system. The conflict between Mavuika and Capitano stems from their respective desires to save Natlan from abyssal destruction, and the enormous difference in approach. Mavuika opts for a riskier plan, which aims to preserve the Night Kingdom. And it's kind of working so far, but she's definitely, absolutely guaranteed gonna have to die. Maybe. On the other hand, Capitano believes that any cost is worth the price of saving the nation, even if it means losing the Night Kingdom and erasing the history, stories, and memories of Natlan, especially if it prevents any abyssal leakage into other nations. When you revisit his lines from earlier in the quest, his desperation makes more sense, because he's seen this abyssal destruction before. He's Khaenri'ah, and he fought against the Abyss during the Cataclysm, and lost everything. Side note, I thought the lead up to this was so good for the reveal, because the way I screamed when they showed Guthred wearing clearly Khaenri'ah attire. Man. So, now it also makes sense that Capitano was one of the earliest recruits, if not the earliest recruit, to the Harbingers. This also explains Capitano's appearance. He's just a sexy Khaenri'ah ghoul, a full-blood with the curse of immortality, with his flesh rotting away while he cannot die. This reminds me how Clotar said he could feel his flesh rotting from the inside, and he had been cursed way less than 500 years. It's brought up that Dane doesn't have this problem, implying there's something special about Dane. This has been implied for a while, I think. For example, remember the Chasm Dainslift quest. Halfdan and the Black Serpent Knights were mindless shells, and perhaps Halfdan was also a rotting ghoulie girl in a suit of armor. Dane was surprised he maintained some cognizance without a particular power or object. So whatever this thing is, it's keeping Dane physically intact. Not mentally though, I'll tell you that for free. But speaking of Dane, Capitano knows him? Only in name during the era of Khaenri'ah, but he encountered him while Dane was traveling with the sibling, post-Cataclysm. And Capitano doesn't wish to harm us because we're related to the sibling. It's implied that Capitano had a role related to how he knew the princess. Guthred calls him a commander, and he had a platoon that he fled to Natlan with, where he ended up fighting more of the Abyss. So I want to speculate on his role and identity a bit further. Because y'all know how much I love my Khaenri'ahs. Now, it's entirely possible that Capitano's true identity is someone we've never heard of, but we have a few Khaenri'ah names to play with, and that's more fun. We know Capitano is the first Fatui Harbinger, and can 1v1 an Archon. And while the book Khaenri'ah is specious, there is a list of the 4 strongest people in Khaenri'ah from different factions. Khaenri'ah himself is one of them, but he can't be Khaenri'ah because Khaenri'ah didn't have any Khaenri'ah blood, and thus was not subjected to any curse. There's also Njord of the Dark Sprites, and Alf, the strongest warrior of the Universitas Magistrorum. Not much to go on for these, but they don't pass my vibe check. But the last of these 4 mightiest people of Khaenri'ah was the commander of half the knights, and this figure, unlike the others, has mentions outside of the book. I have always interpreted half the knights to mean that the Black Serpent Knights were one half, and Schwanenritter, or the Swan Knights, were the other half. The Black Serpent Knights were the royal guard commanded by the Twilight Sword, Captain Dainsliff. Schwanenritter, on the other hand, were the pilots of the giant ruin golems, and their commander was Knight Marshal Anfortas. When King Eärman became indisposed, Anfortas took over as Marshal Regent. He then would go on to fight the Abyss in Sumeru, with his ultimate fate never being revealed. So, perhaps Capitano was the commander of Schwanenritter in Khaenri'ah. Before I continue, I want to shout out a fantastic theorist named Yaegravate, who has been talking about Anfortas being the true identity of Capitano for like at least a year now. They theorize with super insane levels of detail, so I'll link their Tumblr downstairs. But here's the thing, Capitano being Anfortas has the most fun and most buckwild implication that is too delicious not to consider. See, from the Hidden Strife event, we originally learned that it was an Alberich who took over as regent when Eärman's strength failed. Yes, an Alberich, as in Kaeya Alberich. So, Anfortas was actually an Alberich himself. Also, I forgot to mention, remember those 4 mightiest heroes in Parenherry? Yeah, the commander of half the knights is explicitly named as Alberich. Yeah, so if Capitano is Anfortas, then he's also an Alberich. Which, of course, opens up more possibility that Kaeya might have some Fatui connections. I won't speculate too much on the specific relationship between Anfortas and Kaeya, as I've talked about this quite a few times before. But to focus back in on Capitano. As a disclaimer, this has been a lot of speculation, and there are also a few things about Capitano being Anfortas that I personally can't reconcile. Like, Capitano didn't mention fighting in Sumeru, and Anfortas only had one eye due to an injury, but Capitano apparently has more than one eye. Also, it does feel kinda weird that Capitano would casually be the regent of Khaenri'ah, so... Listen, I can't resist not at least exploring this, because then I have my obligatory Kaeya mention. I'm just thinking out loud at this point, though. Maybe he was just a random, super strong Khaenri'an NPC before becoming a Harbinger. I don't know. But regardless of his identity, Capitano would end up in Natlan fighting the Abyss, and while Mavuika pushes forward with her plan, Capitano seems to have another plan cooking. When talking to Mavuika towards the end of the quest, Paimon's like,
"Gee, why does Capitano want to save Natlan so bad? Is he just a really kind-hearted Harbinger who wants to prevent a disaster similar to Khaenri'ah?"
I mean, yes, he's a sweetheart. But also it seems very reasonable that as a survivor of the Cataclysm, who lost everything, that he would want to prevent Cataclysm 2.0. But there's another aspect here that I think is very revealing. At the very end of the quest, Capitano talks to the Lord of Night about the ruler or Shade of Death, Ronova. He knows of her rule, that the debt for the Pyro Archon using her divine borrowed power must be paid with the Pyro Archon's death. The Lord of Night is surprised he knows this, but then realizes Ronova, or maybe more appropriately, Renova's rules, had sent him along this journey of his. Then, Capitano says that he still has a final foe to face. So Ronova, the Shade of Death, seems to be the motivation behind Capitano's actions. What I wonder is if Ronova played a more personal hand in the Cataclysm, and she had done something to make herself Capitano's greatest enemy, aside from the Abyss, or whatever. Let's step back and consider Ronova and her rules. The Lord of Night says that the nature of fate and death are not quite the same. Fate predetermines everything, the timing and manner of events, but death is a rule. Let me rephrase. Fate is hard to change, but may have loopholes and can be deceived. The same cannot be said about death. The Lord of Night makes it clear that death cannot be changed. However, there's something really off about this statement, because this impossible-to-change rule of death doesn't seem to apply to an entire group of people cursed with immortality. Just consider how Dane described the curse to us. The curse of immortality denies death to those afflicted with it, and yet it does not truly mean that they will never die. The body and soul will continue to be eroded until they are virtually non-existent, even if death is not the form that this erosion takes. Here's what I'm getting at. The Khaenri'ah curse of immortality Seems like it has to be Ronova's doing. I mean, she's the shade of death. Dainsleif told us when a god applies a curse, it takes effect at a higher level of reality than the person themselves. He said, it is a way of branding us at the level of the fate of the world itself. This is speculation, but if this is the case, I hope it's obvious now why Ronova would be Capitano's final ultimate foe. Remember what Clothar said, Khaenri'ah already suffered from the cataclysm itself, and then the gods put a curse on them, denying them any chance of respite. The curse was a cruel act of injustice by the gods, or Ronova specifically, against an entire nation. So, this is the curse Capitano has, one that deprives him of death. Now, he's helping to save Natlan, and knows that Mavuika must die. And he's now asking the Lord of Night for some help with something. I have some high-octane crack about this, but there's an idea in my head that tickles my brain. One of Capitano playing very strictly to the rules and revealing how broken they are. Now, keep in mind this situation of Capitano's that I just outlined, and here are some questions I want to pose. The Pyro Archons are not gods. Any human can become the Pyro Archon in Natlan as long as they go through the pilgrimage. So, what if that human happens to have a curse of immortality? A curse written at a higher level of reality that deprives them of death. What happens then if they strike a deal to borrow Ronova's power, and as according to the rules, in exchange, they have to die? Side note, I think it's very possible that Ronova would simply not take the deal, but for our thought exercise, let's just assume that the deal is made, somehow through some means. It's a hypothetical. So, which one takes precedence? The curse of immortality or the rule of death? If it's the curse, then that breaks the rule. If it's death, then that contradicts something written at a higher level of reality. Either way, maybe this would show that the gods are flawed, their laws inadequate, the rules have exceptions. So here's what I want to propose, and again, major crack speculation warning. Only people from Natlan can participate in the pilgrimage. But we were also told that only people in Natlan can get ancient names. But we see the Lord of Night giving Traveler a template for one. So that rule also had an exception. So I think Capitano will ask the Lord of Night for some wiggle room in participating in the pilgrimage. Because if he can participate in the pilgrimage, he could challenge Mavuika for Archonhood. And, as Mavuika said, they're pretty evenly matched, so it'd just be a matter of who wants it more. If Capitano were to win, he could become the Pyro Archon before the final blow to the Abyss, and before the death debt could be repaid. And by doing this, he could face his final foe, Ronova herself. But instead of a fight, Ronova would be given a conundrum. Okay, pause. Admittedly, the Lord of Night part with the pilgrimage is a bit hand-wavy here because technically I guess that was a rule made by Xbalanque, and I honestly don't know how this would play out, so I'm less concerned about being correct here. I just really conceptually like this idea. Imagine being unjustly punished by the gods and rules of heaven, and then finding a way to undermine their authority and judgment by presenting them with a paradox that they created. I mean, personally, I think by doing this, Capitano could prove that these all-powerful gods are not that all-powerful and not that godly. And remember, Capitano said that the Tsaritsa allows the Harbingers to prioritize finding their own meaning for existence. And for Capitano, this vendetta is personal. Although this could also be a convenient way for him to also obtain the Gnosis. Anyway, that's all I really have. Maybe it's just me, but I think this is really interesting to think about. Short video, I know, but I had to get this out of my system, like I said. There's a lot of things I still need to chew on, so maybe I'll revisit these ideas down the road. There's also a ton of stuff I didn't mention at all, so be on the lookout for those. And please like, comment, and subscribe, and share with your friends, and check your smoke detectors. Okay, thank you, bye!